They said it wasn't personal. We just can't afford 2 celebrations this month. Dad smiled, raising his glass. You'll understand, sweetheart. It's your sister's moment to shine. So they canceled my birthday to save for her engagement. The restaurant shimmered with laughter that didn't belong to me. The lights were warm, the music soft, the smiles rehearsed, and at the center table, the one reserved for family, there was an empty chair. My chair. When I tried to sit, Mom whispered, "Oh, honey, there's no space left. Maybe near the buffet?" So I did what I'd always done, stepped aside, smiled, disappeared. But this time, something inside me cracked. I watched my sister glide across the floor in her glittering dress while I stood by the edge, holding my untouched drink. They thought I'd forgotten, that I'd stay quiet forever. But that night, as the crowd toasted to love and new beginnings, I decided to give them a speech they'd never forget. If you've ever been erased from your own story, hit like and subscribe. Tell me where you're listening from, because this is the night silence finally spoke. Let me take you back to where it all began. Growing up, I learned early how to make myself small. Not because I wanted to, but because there was never any room left. Every corner of our house, every conversation, every proud smile already belonged to my sister. Mom used to say, "She's fragile, you're strong, don't make a fuss." And I believed her. So I watched her get the new dresses, the dance recitals, the birthday parties with balloons and music. Mine were simpler dinner at home. A small slice of leftover cake, sometimes even a "we'll do it next weekend" that never came. At first, I told myself it didn't matter, that love didn't have to be fair to be real. But over time, I started noticing the pattern. When she cried, everyone listened. When I cried, they called me dramatic. When she failed, they said she was finding herself. When I succeeded, they said, "Well, of course she did." My chair at the dinner table was always near the end, easier to get up when someone needed help. By 16, I had mastered the art of being useful, invisible, polite. I learned to stay quiet when she complained about her pressure, while I quietly juggled 2 part-time jobs to help pay the bills no one mentioned. The last birthday they remembered was my 18th. Even then, it wasn't about me. Halfway through dinner, Mom got a call from the jeweler about a necklace for my sister's upcoming engagement. She left my cake untouched on the table. When she came back, she said, "We'll celebrate properly once we finalize everything for her big day." I smiled, nodded, and whispered, "Sure." That was the night I stopped expecting anyone to remember. Still, I tried to be good, to help, to belong, to matter. When my sister got engaged, I offered to organize the event. It felt safer to contribute from the shadows than risk being forgotten entirely. But as the day drew closer, I could feel something tightening inside me, a quiet ache that wasn't just sadness. It was the realization that love in our house had always been conditional. And when they canceled my birthday altogether, just a text that said, "Hope you understand, sweetheart," I did. For the first time in my life, I truly understood. They didn't mean to erase me. They just never thought I was worth remembering. After that text, I didn't mention my birthday again. No one else did either. The night came and went like any other, except quieter. I worked late, came home to an empty house, and found the table already set for tomorrow's engagement meeting. White flowers, silver cutlery, 2 champagne glasses waiting for someone else's joy. In the middle of it all, one thing caught my eye: the extra chair. They must have pulled it from storage to make space for guests. It sat slightly crooked at the edge of the table, a small crack running down its back. I remember standing there, staring at it. That chair had always been mine, the one I used to pull closer when the table felt too full, the one no one ever offered but I took anyway. For years, it was where I waited to be noticed. That night, I dragged it to the corner, lit a single candle, and placed a cupcake on the plate. No song, no presents, no one saying my name, just me and that flickering light in the dark. And as the wax melted down, I whispered to the flame, "This year, you're my only witness." I think that was the first time I realized how lonely love can be when it only shines in one direction. The next morning, Mom texted again, "Don't forget to iron your sister's dress for the engagement shoot. You're so good at those little details." I stared at the screen until it blurred. All those years, I thought being good meant being helpful, being quiet, being needed. But what they really meant was, be invisible so others can glow. That week, I started noticing every moment I'd been erased. Old photos where I stood half out of frame. Family videos where my voice was there but my face wasn't. The birthday card from my grandmother that said, "Proud of both of you girls," even though only one gift was inside the envelope. Every proof of my existence was faint, soft enough to ignore, easy to crop out. The day before the engagement, I walked through the decorated hall, checking details for the event I'd planned but wouldn't be credited for. The floral arch gleamed under the golden lights, the champagne tower sparkled like a promise I'd never been offered. And there it was again, that same chair, placed at the edge of the family table, unclaimed, waiting. I ran my fingers across its surface, rough and cold. It wasn't just furniture anymore. It was me, the quiet shape in every family photo that no one looks at, but everyone uses. That's when something inside me shifted. I didn't know it yet, but the next time I touched that chair, I wouldn't be sitting in the shadows. The engagement party glowed like a scene from someone else's dream. Soft jazz, floating petals, the scent of champagne and roses. Everything perfect except for the hollow ache sitting just behind my ribs. I arrived early, as always, to make sure things ran smoothly. I adjusted the lights, helped the florist, arranged the table cards. When I got to the family table, I saw it again, my chair. The same one from the storage room, cleaned, polished, and placed right beside the stage. But this time, my name wasn't on it. The place card simply said, "Reserved." I asked Mom who it was for. "Oh," she said, distracted, "one of your sisters-in-laws. There wasn't enough room for everyone, so we had to shift things a bit. You don't mind, do you? There's a small table near the buffet. You'll still see everything." Then she smiled, as if she'd done me a kindness. I nodded. Of course. I never minded. That was my role, the girl who adjusted. As guests filled the room, I drifted to the edge of the crowd, holding a glass I didn't drink. My sister's laughter carried through the hall, high, shimmering, effortless. Cameras flashed. Every head turned toward her. And for a moment, watching her surrounded by the people I once tried to impress, I felt like I didn't exist at all. Not out of anger, out of absence. I glanced at the family table again. Everyone was seated, smiling, clinking glasses. The only thing left untouched was that empty chair still waiting, perfectly lit by the chandelier. Something inside me hardened, then steadied. I'd spent my entire life waiting for someone to offer me a seat at the table, in the conversation, in the story. But the truth was, no one ever gives you space when they've already decided you don't belong. You take it. When the MC took the mic and announced, "Let's invite any family member who'd like to share a few words about this beautiful couple," everyone hesitated. Then all eyes turned to Dad. He laughed. "Oh, not me. Maybe her sister, she's good with words." The crowd clapped lightly. I could feel the weight of their expectation, another polite speech from the quiet daughter, the one who never causes trouble. So I walked forward. Not toward the stage, not toward my sister, but toward the empty chair. I placed my hand on its back. And for the first time in my life, I didn't ask permission to be seen. The room fell quiet when I reached the stage. The music faded, the chatter softened. Only the sound of my heels echoed against the marble floor as I dragged the chair with me, its wooden legs scraping a long, sharp line through the laughter. Every head turned. Every smile froze. I could feel my parents' confusion, my sister's nervous glance, the guests' curious stares. I set the chair beside the microphone and looked at it for a moment. Then I looked at them. "This chair," I began, my voice steady, "has followed me my whole life. It's always there at every family dinner, every holiday, every celebration. Sometimes near the table, sometimes in the corner, but it's always the same, empty." A few people shifted uncomfortably. Someone chuckled, thinking it was the start of a joke. It wasn't. I ran my hand along the top of the chair. Tonight was supposed to be my birthday, but it was canceled, because there wasn't enough money for 2 celebrations. A murmur rippled through the crowd. My father's hand tightened around his glass. "I understand," I continued softly. "I've always understood. You said I was strong, that she needed more attention, that I'd get my turn later, but later never came." I paused, letting the silence breathe. The kind of silence that demands to be listened to. I used to think this chair was empty because I didn't try hard enough to earn my place at the table, but I see it differently now. I lifted the chair and set it firmly in the center of the stage. "It wasn't empty. You just stopped seeing who sat here." Gasps echoed. My mother's eyes filled, my sister's smile faltered. I smiled not bitterly but with a strange calm. So, tonight, I'm not sitting near the buffet. I'm not standing in the corner. I'm taking my seat back. Then I pulled the chair toward the microphone and sat down. The audience was silent, not the polite kind, but the kind that means something shifted. I looked at my sister, radiant and trembling. "I love you," I said, "but love isn't supposed to make anyone disappear." And then, for the first time, I felt the power of being seen. Not as a background character, not as a helper, but as a person who finally stopped shrinking. I stood, left the chair on stage, and walked off. No applause, no music, just a stunned, ringing quiet. But behind me, someone began to clap. Then another, and suddenly, the room that had never made space for me was filled with the sound of hands acknowledging I was finally there. I didn't stay to see their faces. The applause followed me out of the hall, faint and uneven, like rain hitting glass. I walked through the hotel corridor, still clutching the microphone I'd forgotten to set down. My hands were trembling, but not from fear, from release. For the first time in my life, I had taken space instead of giving it away. That night, I went home alone. The silence felt different, lighter. No longer empty, just mine. I set the microphone beside the candle on my desk and whispered, "Happy birthday." By morning, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Someone had recorded my speech. A 2-minute clip titled, "The Forgotten Daughter's Speech That Silenced the Room" was everywhere: Twitter, TikTok, YouTube. Comments poured in from strangers. That was powerful. She said what so many of us feel. That chair, I felt that. My inbox filled with messages from people who'd been invisible in their own families. Some wrote paragraphs, others just a sentence. "Thank you for saying it out loud." I didn't know how to process it. All I'd done was tell the truth. By noon, news outlets picked it up. A local radio host called it the most honest moment ever caught on camera at a family event. Meanwhile, my parents' phone lines must have been lighting up too. Late that evening, Mom texted, "We need to talk." Then another one from Dad, "You embarrassed us." I stared at those words for a long time. The old me would have cried, apologized, tried to explain. But now, I just locked my screen. Because I hadn't done it to humiliate them. I did it to stop disappearing. 2 days later, a journalist reached out a woman who said she hadn't spoken to her own parents in years after they forgot her graduation. She wanted to interview me for a feature called "The Daughters Who Stayed Silent Too Long." When I told her I wasn't sure, she said softly, "Sometimes telling your story helps others find their own voice." So I said yes. When the article went live, it wasn't about drama or revenge. It was about how families can love and still wound. How silence becomes a habit. How, sometimes, all it takes to break the pattern is one brave sentence. That night, I got another text, this time from my sister. "I didn't know you felt that way. I'm sorry. It wasn't perfect. It didn't fix everything. But it was the first time anyone had seen me not as the helper, not as the strong one, but as a person with her own story." 3 days later, my parents showed up at my apartment unannounced. I saw their reflection through the frosted glass door before I heard the knock. Mom's voice trembled when she said my name. When I opened the door, she was holding a bouquet, the same kind she'd once said was too expensive for your birthdays. Dad stood beside her, hands in his pockets, face stiff with a mixture of pride and shame. "Can we come in?" he asked quietly. I let them. Not because I wanted an apology, but because I was finally strong enough not to need one. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where, for years, I'd waited for them to remember me. Now, they looked small, sitting across from me. No chandeliers, no crowd, no stage, just truth. Mom spoke first. "We didn't mean to hurt you. We thought you understood." "I did," I said. "That was the problem." Her eyes filled. "When we saw the video, Dad cut in, voice breaking for the first time in my life. "We were ashamed. Not because of what you said, but because you were right." For a long moment, none of us moved. The air between us felt fragile, like glass that had already cracked. Finally, Mom whispered, "You've always been the strong one. We relied on that too much." Then, almost pleading, "Do you hate us?" I shook my head. No. I just stopped trying to earn love that should have been given freely. She cried, then not loud, not dramatic, just quiet sobs that came from somewhere old. Dad reached across the table, his voice rough. We can't change what we did, but maybe we can start by showing up next time. I nodded, not as forgiveness, but as acceptance. Sometimes, closure isn't a clean ending, it's a moment when pain stops needing to explain itself. Before they left, Mom glanced at the chair beside me. You only have 3? Yeah, I said. The 4th one's at the hotel. Her eyes softened. Maybe it should stay there as a reminder. After they left, I sat alone for a while, the sunlight spilling across the table. The silence was gentle this time, not empty, not cold. Then my phone buzzed again. The article had just hit 1 million views. Among the comments was one from someone I didn't know. That speech made me pull out a chair for myself too. I smiled. Justice hadn't come from anger. It came from honesty, the kind that doesn't scream, but settles quietly in the heart of anyone who's ever been unseen. That night, I opened my window and whispered to the air, "You saw me now, didn't you?" And for the first time, I didn't need an answer. A year passed, seasons shifted quietly, and so did I. The noise around the viral speech faded, but the echoes stayed not online, not in headlines, but inside me. On my next birthday, I didn't wait for anyone to plan it. I booked a small rooftop cafe by the river, invited a few friends, people who saw me without needing to be reminded I existed. There were no spotlights, no speeches, no cameras. Just soft music, warm laughter, and 4 chairs at a round table. As the night settled, one chair remained empty. Someone asked, "Should we bring another guest?" I smiled. No. That one's for her, the girl who waited for a seat that was always taken. We lit the candles, and the city lights shimmered against the glass. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was celebrating survival. I was celebrating presence. Halfway through dinner, my phone buzzed. A message from Dad. "Happy birthday, sweetheart. We're proud of you." And one from Mom. "We set a chair for you tonight." I looked at the screen for a moment, then turned it face down. Because I didn't need that chair anymore. I'd already found my own. I stood, raised my glass, and said quietly to no one and everyone, "Here's to the ones who had to pull up their own seat and learned they belonged all along." The night breeze caught my words, carrying them out across the river, gentle, unhurried, free. As I sat back down, I traced the rim of my glass and smiled. For years, that empty chair had been a symbol of what I'd lost. Now, it was a reminder of everything I'd claimed back. My voice, my place, my worth. The candles flickered, painting gold across the table, and I whispered one last time, "Sometimes, you have to sit where no one saves you a seat, to realize the table was yours all along."